There have been a bunch of DIY trends sweeping the interwebs during lockdown. Of course, there's the bread baking, the whipped dalgona coffees, and one that's slowly emerging as the springtime comes into bloom, my personal favorite, the Victory Garden. There's never been a better time to plant your own edible garden. So today, I'm chatting with agronomist Ian Beaker of Castle Hot Springs, who's also known as a flavor farmer. If that's not the coolest job title, I don't know what is. It's a little bit of a return to my roots as well. Before I started writing about food, I actually spent a year working on organic farms around the globe just to learn more about food production. And both my dad and my uncle are avid home gardeners. Trust me when I tell you guys, there is nothing better than tasting a warm tomato that you've grown right off the vine, especially in these crazy times. Ian is going to give us tips and tricks on plants we can regenerate, like onions and celery, what seeds are best for black thumbs to start with, and how to start a small space garden for radical self-sufficiency, even in the smallest urban spaces. Trust me, anybody can do this, okay? So let's get talking with Ian Beaker of Castle Hot Springs. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Thank you so much, Ian, for joining me at the crack of noon.
Of course.
To start off, I'm very curious. I don't know if did you bring a bevy along? Because we usually kind of do this like a Zoom happy hour.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Hey, salud.
Salud to you. Oh my gosh. It's not often I find myself drinking at this hour, but quarantine life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, things are changing. So this is our lithium lager. So we just started canning it, but it is essentially a lager that we've selected that is brewed with our water, and then also so it's just a really nice, refreshing lager. And so it's not your typical like IPA or anything. It's just very drinkable. It's got great flavor, and so it's the perfect patio pounder is what we say, and then that's the tagline is an Oasis in a can.
Oh my God, I could so use an Oasis in a can right now. We all could.
Yeah, so it's pretty great.
So just real quick, paint a picture for me of where you are, because it sounds kind of like utopia.
Yes, it actually is. So it is an oasis. It's a desert oasis. So we are here at Castle Hot Springs. And so it is 110-acre property that, has a hot springs in the middle of it. And so the hot springs is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it pops out 200,000 gallons a day of anywhere between 118 degree water, essentially. That fluctuates a little bit, but it's not very common in just north of Phoenix where you get something like that, right? So it's surrounded by kind of the Bradshaw Mountains. It's in a valley. I mean, if you think of like Southwest movies, that's kind of where we're at right now. Like we're in that canyon that you're thinking of with a ton of saguaros, and so it is a pretty unbelievable place. And then the resort itself is fantastic. I mean, 34 rooms. The farm is right in the middle of it, and so it's farm to table. It's got the whole thing going on, and so we're it's a good place to be.
Oh man, yeah, that's where I need to escape to if this apocalypse gets any more serious.
Part of me is kind of it's a great place to quarantine. We weren't really supposed to be in the springs and everything when guests are here, but now it's game on. So it's actually been a really fun change of pace for us here.
I love that. So so you are in this desert oasis. So how did you find yourself there? Did you grow up in it's you said it's outside Scottsdale, right?
Yeah, it's about in 45 minutes like northwest of Phoenix. It takes about an hour and 15 to get from Sky Harbor Airport.
Amazing. Yeah, I've been seeing what you guys are doing. The CSA boxes look so beautiful, and it's an interesting pivot. A lot of restaurants here in Los Angeles are starting to be outlets for CSA delivery. So I think people are getting more and more connected to where their food comes from and really understanding the importance of knowing the supply chain and also really wanting to grow their own food. I know a lot of people are planting victory gardens. Do you think that this is like the ideal time for this sort of radical self-sufficiency?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think that you can call them whatever you want, victory gardens, coronavirus, or corona gardens. So, but yeah, I think it's great. I think it's perfect time. As a society, I think we've gotten pretty far away from the source of our produce, right? I mean, how often do you purchase something in a store and actually know where that came from? Very, very rarely do you actually ever see that. And so that's one thing that we're trying to do here is we actually, we show our guests the plant, you know, in the ground and have them taste that. And then they go and like try it on their plate. And so it doesn't get much like, closer than that. And so I think it's a good time for people to reevaluate that and kind of, start growing some stuff themselves and kind of get a little bit more in tune to nature, like you said. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I've just been blown away just seeing even the way that people are walking in my neighborhood and observing the flowers and just really being much more present.
Yes.
And I think there's nothing more like more present than farming, even if it's just something as simple as, a little potted plant or some basil in your windowsill. Like, I don't know, there's something very rewarding about, like you said, knowing where something comes from. And it's even better if you grew it yourself. I think also people are baking bread with this wild abandon. Like I think people are really craving that connection right now, and farming or just growing your own food is a great way to do it.
Totally. It's not only do you get to reap the benefits, but I think there's also countless health benefits to the mentally, right, and to farming as well. I mean, one of the reasons why I grew up in Arcadia, just in Scottsdale, and it's not like I grew up on a farm, right? Like my dad's a doctor. But one of the things that got me into farming was that I read a quote one time that says farmers on average have the highest life expectancy and highest quality of life out of any other profession. And I honestly don't even know if that's true or not. I didn't fact check it, but it was enough for me to go to school for it. So I think that it's there's definitely some merit there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, aside from like the nutritional value, which, we could go on for days and
Yep.
days, and the fact that it just tastes better,
Yeah.
I think just being active, right? And just keep, continually moving, being out in the
Yeah.
sunshine, getting some wonderful sunlight. Like, I mean, they've done studies about, even in the 1918, that flu, they started putting people's hospital beds outside and they saw a dramatic increase in recovery. So just being outdoors
Yeah.
and also having your hands in the dirt. You guys probably have some of that like crazy quartz dirt out there, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. No, we've got some great soil out here. We did bring in a lot of compost and amended our soil pretty heavily to be able to achieve as many varieties as we want to. But yeah, I think like if you look at my hands right now, I pretty much have permanent like soil in there. So I've always got my hands in the soil.
You have become one with the land. I love it. Yeah, we're needing that. It's interesting when you start talking about soil because that's kind of the screeching halt I've come to, right? Because everyone talks about composting and amending the soil and making sure that like that's the number one thing is not necessarily the seeds that you get or the seedlings that you buy, but more the soil and taking care of the soil. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Soil health is key, right? I mean, that's a huge part of what organic farming really and farming in general is making sure that you have a balance within the soil, right? And so there's different nutrients in there that, that can get out of whack and everything. And so having a really nice, compost base is always good. The plant will tell you when something's wrong. Typically, I mean, I've gotten a lot of soil tests over the years, and I took a lot of soil science type classes in college and everything. But the plant will typically tell you how it's feeling. It can get a little complicated, but you can do one size fits all. I mean, Happy Frog mix is really good. There's a lot of your typical potting soils are generally a pretty good place to start. Yeah.
And that's a balance. The potting soil would be a balance of the nitrogen and the phosphorus.
Yeah, typically, yeah, they're typically a good one. And then you also have some we call it just like buffer capacity And so with compost, you're adding a buffer because there's so much like organic material in the soil that there's so much micro, biology happening with that.
Interesting. So, that's obviously, may seem a little daunting for people, right? Like the average Joe living in the city, like New Yorkers, Angelina knows. What are some like just really easy things you can start with, like even just in a windowsill that may not be expected, maybe beyond the, basil from Trader Joe's or whatever?
Totally. Basil from Trader Joe's is a good thing to have. All plants are. But as far as something that's pretty easy that you can do on a windowsill, um, actually, this one's kind of interesting. If you want to get a little bit crazy, we do these microgreens. And so you see that right there? And
Ooh,
so
those
it's
are beautiful.
basically little sprouts, right? And so there's
Mhm.
there's there's kits that you can get that basically germinate these seeds, and then you put them in a little seed tray with a little soil, and then you don't really need too much light at all for that. And there's kits you can get uh, online for those, and you can just order more. These are radish shoots, so radishes are generally pretty easy. If you want a nice like you know if you want success germinating seeds, I recommend radish seeds. Yeah, they're
Radish
good.
seeds.
But
And what do you use those for? Do you use radish greens just in like a salad mix, or what do you do with them?
yeah, so we have a microgreens mix that we do, and we have a microgreen salad that we do. But I mean, I use them for everything. Like you can put them on a sandwich, you can mix them in with a salad. It's a nice kind of spicy flavor to them. And all a microgreen really is it's a plant. So this is it right here. So it's just like that's the seed right there, and then you got the little roots coming down, and then you got these two first leaves, which are called cotyledons for dicots. It's a mono. So radish is a dicot. You have monocots if it has one leaf. So that's the difference. But they
Oh,
yeah
okay.
they use these for everything, sandwiches, salads. You know, I just eat them like peas and
Yeah.
sunflowers. You can do too, and those are fantastic as well. So microgreen setup is a pretty good thing to do. Yeah,
Do they have the spicy flavor of a radish?
they do definitely have that spicy flavor.
Ooh.
So yeah, you can do they. What's awesome about microgreens as well is that if you think of a plant, it puts all its energy towards its seed at the end of its life, right? So all of that nutrients kind of comes up in that first little thing. So not only are they delicious, but they're also really nutrient dense. So they're really good for you. And so, and they also carry a lot of that same flavor. I mean, if you ever have the chance to have, uh, you know, cilantro microgreens, it's just like all that cilantro flavor packed into that little thing. I mean, it's pretty nice. So yeah,
Yeah, it's almost like it's been, like, compressed when they give you, like, compressed watermelon or whatever
totally.
from the
Yeah, yeah,
sous vide
yeah.
thing
It's
or whatever.
concentrated. So yeah.
Very concentrated. That's so cool. Okay, so radish greens. Where do you get the seeds for these sort of things? Because I know that as I've started looking, because people are so into the idea of gardening right now, a lot of the sources are either well, some of them are physically closed. The little smaller nurseries in the neighborhood. Where can you order seeds online?
I go through a lot of different seed companies. So, but a couple of my favorites, Baker Creek Heirloom is probably my favorite for just overall all vegetable seeds. So they have a huge variety of heirloom seeds. Then more farm based. You have High Mowing, Johnny's Seeds, Kitazawa. Burpee is also really good. Botanical Interest is actually one of my favorites as well.
Hey, so do seeds go bad?
The longer you wait with seeds, the more the lower your germination percentage. And so, you could still have.
Oh my god, can you give them, like, IVF? It sounds like IVF and, like sorry, I'm a 35-year-old woman, a lot of my friends are doing IVF and, like, freezing their eggs. It's like, your rate really goes down. They're like what do they call them? I'm not sure. They call it geriatric. They're
Geriatric,
geriatric
yes.
seeds. Well, actually, that segues really nicely into my next question. So, um, when you're talking about planting plants, and if you say, for instance, you've got yourself a small little bed that you've put together, or even just a larger container or pot, Do you want to grow multiple things in that area, or do you want to leave it designated to like, okay, this is my tomato pot, this is my chard pot, this is my basil pot?
It depends on what the plant is. So, like mint, for example, has a tendency to just to take over, right? So, if you're trying to grow mint, typically don't want to put that in your garden bed, for example, like a big garden bed, unless you want a big, giant thing of mint eventually. Get a pot, however much mint you use, and then just keep the mints in that pot. Like that's typically But when it comes to other things, you can definitely have cilantro, basil, parsley um, in the same pot. A lot of these culinary herbs and everything have very similar needs, right? As far as nutrient uptake and soil drainage and all that.
So we're kind of we're at the beginning of what is most people's the spring planting season. What are some things that we should be thinking about? Ordering our seeds and planting now, and when do we need to do that by?
It just depends on where you're at, honestly. I mean, if you're growing indoor, not really too much changes. But if you're growing outdoor, I would look at your local master gardening um, organization. So there's typically like a master gardening thing for the different counties, and they'll typically have a
Hmm.
planting calendar. So there's probably a planting calendar for your area. Here, I like to use the Maricopa Master Gardening planting calendar. So you can just type that in on Google. It'll come up and it'll show you when to plant things, when to seed things. It'll have a huge list of all most of the crops that you can think about growing, and then it'll show you when you should be seeding those, if you should be seeding those, when you should transplant them, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a great resource. Just look at your local planting
Local planting calendar from the master gardeners. Leave it to the masters to put that
calendar.
together. That's really great. What a great resource. And is there anything for like a first time gardener that's a great crop? The microgreens sound really cool and somewhat foolproof. What else would you recommend?
Microgreens are fun. There's a lot that can go wrong with them, so they're not necessarily like foolproof. I always try to, tell people grow what you think you're going to use, right? So what do you actually have in your fridge all the time? A lot of people grow a lot of greens. Uh, One that's a little bit different that we really have had a lot of success with is a green called Tokyo Pecan, and it's like a Chinese cabbage, uh, and it does so well. You can plant it pretty densely, or you can just do one, and then it kind of grows like like a mixture of like a Napa cabbage and romaine lettuce.
Oh my god, I think I saw this in my one of my neighbor's gardens. It looks like cabbage leaves. They're really hardy, but it doesn't cluster like so. It kind of flows out. Like a kale or something.
Totally.
Looser leaves. Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. And so, what you're looking for too is I like to have things that are what I like to call cut and come again. So a lot of people think that when you harvest something, you just need to kind of cut the whole plant out, like you get a lettuce head from the store, right? But in reality, if you just chop that lettuce off, it'll most varieties will actually come back again. So you can get multiple harvests out of it. So I think that's
Huh.
big for home gardeners where you don't want to keep on seeding all the time, succession planting and all that. You kind of just want to plant once and then get as many harvests as you possibly can.
And then how much does the Tokyo Picana does it need a lot of dirt? Like how much space root room do you need for something like that?
Yeah, it needs a little bit of dirt. I would say like a minimum of 5 inches, probably
Hmm.
6 inches. So if you're gonna do it in a pot or something like an old nursery pot that you have, like a 1 gallon. It would probably work in that. I haven't done that before, but I think that it
Mhm.
would do fine. And then also, what I love about the Tokyo Bicanas is that you can plant one seed and let it grow into this kind of bigger plant, or you can almost people use them for microgreens too. So you can plant as much as you want, and then just get it at that young stage and kind of thin it out as you go. And that's another reason why I like to plant very densely is because you can kind of harvest at that small size and then let the bigger
Mhm.
ones grow big. And so it elongates your harvest window.
I love that. I'm one thing I'm fascinated by right now too is people just like even taking their little water cup and cutting off, the bottom of a green onion and letting that regrow. And I was chatting with my aunt the other day and she was like, I did that with a bok choy. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah,
So like what is that? How does that work? It
totally.
looks magic.
Yeah. So for a lot of these, like lettuces and celery and all sorts of stuff, um, when you get them at the store, you get that little nub at the bottom, which that's actually technically the root ball, even though it was cut directly above where most of the roots are. That still kind of has those root like cells in there, right? And so if you plant something like that, you can do it with lettuce, like a head of romaine lettuce, all headed lettuce. You can do it with. Then if you just put that in some soil, it'll actually grow roots, right? And then it'll actually start a new. It won't start it. It'll revive. It's a head lettuce is technically still living, right? And so it'll revive that plant into growing again. So that's kind of a fun little thing to do, on a windowsill as well. So
Yeah, and but do they ever need soil? I feel like I've seen things sprouting and it's like, well, did then people plant them after they start sprouting or what's going on
yes,
there?
you will eventually need to plant them. I mean,
Yeah.
or have some sort of nutrients in the water as well. You could essentially make a little like hydroponic setup, where you just put like a little something in that water and then it just continues to grow. So that's how a lot of hydroponic lettuce is grown actually is it's just that root ball that goes down into water, which is some nutrient solution in there. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, and that's where you get a lot of like your living lettuce from.
Interesting. So you can do that. Can you do it with fennel? Because fennel has that bottom
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. I've never, let's see. You definitely can do it in fennel because I've seen a
Mhm.
fennel plant actually come up in my compost before. So
Whoa.
maybe that from like one that was already grown. So it can definitely happen with fennel.
Yeah. As we're starting to plan our gardens, what is the one major no-no, especially for a first timer?
Yeah, I would say don't overthink it. It's planting. It's meant to be fun. I would say if anything, overseed. Don't underseed. Don't expect it to be perfect. Right. It's kind of the process that matters, and 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 keep on trying everything. So I think that's really important. Is that not overthinking things and just having a good time with it really and utilizing it and trying it as you go, right?
Mhm, mhm. That's so important now too, is just like to realize we don't have control over everything and just kind of let nature's gonna run its course. You gotta just kind of work with it.
That's right. I mean, that's agriculture in a nutshell, right? We're just letting nature happen, but we're guiding it.
How is the industry holding up out there? I know that farmers are really facing a lot of issues right now on so many levels. What's going on?
Totally. Just like anything else, it's been a big pivot, right? So, I've got a lot of farming friends in town that have had that most of their business is actually revolved around restaurant stuff, right? So that's one thing that you're seeing a big pivot from the smaller farms and larger farms as well is going from that restaurant sales, kind of bulk to having to, put together things for the grocery store and also these farm boxes as well. Like that's I mean if you look at CSA sales, it's like it was kind of starting to decline. People will kind of want that, and then all of a sudden, like the coronavirus hits, and it's like it's quintupled. I don't even know. It's uh it's been a big change as far as that goes. We've all had to kind of take a step back as well, think about food safety, kind of how we hand washing stations, and you're kind of doubling down on a lot of those things, right? And so and keeping distance between the customers. So I mean it's an interesting time, but there's been a major pivot, and so um, and it happened very quickly, and so people are kind of struggling with it. and sometimes, it's harder the more infrastructure you have for something to make that complete pivot, right? If all your
Right.
infrastructure focused on restaurant sales, you have all these boxes, big boxes specifically for, sales to restaurants and all that stuff, then it's a little bit more difficult to make that pivot, right? So we're actually lucky that we're in a situation where, you know, our owners are fantastic, first of all. So they're, helping us in any way that they can. And then also, we're a very diversified farm. So we don't really lean on one crop or one system for how we do things. So I always encourage that with farmers, to try to kind of diversify. You don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? You have to grow, different things, and I don't think it's ever been more present than, or that's never been more true than kind of right now, right? Kind
Hmm.
of figuring that out. Don't live paycheck to paycheck, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like you got to diversify, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what's really interesting to me though, I mean, this is a pivot for me right now, like physically doing this podcast. I'm like, all right, well, normally I'm out in the field producing. I would be with you. We'd be shooting. We'd be doing video. I'd be interviewing you literally in the field. Um, but because I'm a small business and it's usually I have contractors, but it's me and it's small. I can make something like this work. It is a much bigger issue when you start talking about, major studios and things like that and all of the employees they have to support it. I think the mid-sized business is really where the problems are going to rise because the big guys seem to have soaked up all the money for the PPP and SBA and everything and figured out, they got lawyers and teams of people on it, and then the small ones, we can do these little pivots really quickly, really nimbly because, we're capable of doing it. But anyone who's like small to mid-size, I think it's a real pain point. I mean, everybody's hurting, but at least in that stance of not being able to agilely, shift to the
Yeah,
business.
I couldn't agree more. It's that kind of 4 acre to like 100 acre farm that's really kind of feeling it right now. You've never had a better time to cook, so find your local CSA and get it going. At least until you have your time for your radishes to germinate, Tokyo become green and all that.
Exactly. Hey, what are you cooking right now that you're enjoying?
One thing that I recently did, and one of the other farmers introduced me to it, is kohlrabi. Kohlrabi latkes
Ooh, I love that idea. I love broccoli latkes. I feel like that would
you
fly.
can do some really awesome like root vegetable latkes, and that's
Just kind of grate the vegetable and then use that instead of potato.
totally. And so yeah, a lot of these vegetables, these root vegetables, can be used in place of potatoes and all sorts of stuff. So that was pretty fun. I'm constantly messing around with stuff. Last night, we were grilling and I took a head of lettuce and just split it in half, put it on the grill for about 20 seconds, with some chicken that we were doing, and then you just take that. It's like grilled lettuce, and you just pour some balsamic vinaigrette in there, and you have like a
Mhm.
toasted salad, which is
Mm,
kind of
yeah, I think like roast or grilled lettuce or even like roasted lettuces is kind of this weirdly underrated thing. Hopefully people catch on to
totally,
it because it's also so affordable. Like cabbage, I've been eating a lot of cabbage lately because it's like 99 cents for a head of it,
totally.
and
Cabbage is great when it comes to that. Yeah,
actually last night I did a good one. I had some leftover ragu that I'd like defrosted from a previous cooking adventure and then just stuffed that with some like a little bit of egg and breadcrumb and rolled it up in some cabbage and paprika on top. And I was like, look, it's, it's stuffed cabbage.
totally.
It was really tasty.
Yeah, we tend to get a little crazy here also because we have all these super talented chefs and bartenders and beverage people, and so you're just surrounded by this like elevated cuisine level. So as the farmer, when you're providing to these people, it's like you get all these ideas and you're constantly working with them, and so it's a fun place to be. So, and
Yeah.
it's always fun to get a basket and just kind of figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I love cooking for myself, but I can't wait for the day that I can, be a guest at a place like Castle Hot Springs.
You
I mean,
come
just
out. We should. I'll get that. I'll get that set up for you. Once this whole thing blows over, we'll get you out here.
Look, I am a very dedicated woofer. You can put me to work. I'll have a great time doing it. I feel like I could learn a lot from you guys, and I, wish you all the best as you continue to forge forth and serve the community with your beautiful produce. I mean, what a blessing for them to have you guys as a resource.
Totally. Fantastic. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ian. I really appreciate it. Cheers to you.
Of course, cheers. Hey.
Cheers to our spring harvest.
Right.
We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. All right.
Bye.
Yep. Happy planting.